Good afternoon, good morning, and possibly good evening, depending on which time zone you are. Welcome to this second session on education and capacity development at the intersection of groundwater, climate change, and resilience, the theme 5 of the online conference, coordinated by the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program of UNESCO. Dear participants, my name is Jorge Ellis. I am based at UNESCO's headquarters in Paris, France, and it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the chairs of the session, Alicia Aureli, who is the coordinator of the Internationally Shared Aquifer Resources Management Program, ISARM. She is the chief of the Groundwater Systems and Settlements section of UNESCO's Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, and Adrian Parr. She is the dean of the College of Architecture, Planning, and Public Affairs, and she is the coordinator of the UNESCO Chair of Water and Human Settlements at the University of Texas at Arlington in the United States. Housekeeping indications have already been placed in the chat box. So Adrian, over to you.
So much, Jorge. I really appreciate that introduction. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome everybody here today to the session on groundwater education and capacity building. As Jorge already mentioned, my co-moderator is Alicia Aureli, and we've got a wonderful lineup here of lectures. We have Moshood Tijani, the Groundwater Desk Officer from Abuja, Nigeria, and African Ministers Council on Water. Kevin Pietersen, UNESCO Chair of Geohydrology, Institute for Water Studies, University of Western Cape, and L2K2 consultants. Followed by a general session of question and answer period. And then after that, we'll be having a special panel on groundwater education and capacity development with a high-level statement provided by Margaret, Irungu, the Transboundary Water Resources Department, Ministry of Water and Irrigation in Kenya. Then Christian Severin, the Senior Environmental Specialist of GEF, IWRA, Learn, Global Environment Facility Secretariat. Followed by that with Alberto Manganelli, the Regional Center for Groundwater Management for Latin America and the Caribbean in Uruguay. Concluding with Mary Kamulu, the former permanent delegate of Kenya to UNESCO. Please be aware that questions can be placed in the chat, and when we have the general Q&A session, we'll be addressing your questions at that time. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker. First speaker, Moshood Tijani.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm presenting a new AMCOW agenda to improve capacity and education of groundwater resources in Africa. And that has to do with a flagship program called African AMCOW Pan-African Groundwater Program, APAGroP. Next slide, please. As a way of introduction, we know that the potential for human resources development in water sector usually depends on the educational capacity and related resources in any countries. And that is no mistake when we see that the SDGs targets are all dependent on development and capacity development and building in most of the program. And in that case, if you look at the capacity building, capacity development, we have to look at it from the twin concept of institutional capacity and policy strengthening, and then we have the human dimension, which is the human development. And the human development capacity building aspect can involve a lot of in the role playing, the different modules of case study, internship, online training, train the trainer, field exercise, hand-on field practical exercise, excursions, and so we have different modules where this capacity building can be can be deployed. Next slide, please. So now, looking at that, effective capacity building, therefore, will involve an enabling environment with appropriate policy and legal framework. It will involve institutional capacity, community participation, human resources development. And that human resources development aspect has to involve the training and education. The training can be formal and informal, and the training can also involve competence, vocational, and all of them have to develop knowledge, develop skill and competence. And this skill and competence to be developed, we need an enabling environment, we need an organizational and institutional incentive. And all this together definitely will enhance effective performance and service delivery. Next slide, please. So in that case, the question will arise is, why groundwater education in Africa? So number one, we realize that there is need for that groundwater education because by 2025, 60% of the world population, there will be increase up to more than 5 billion, and that will be living mostly in Africa, in the large cities. And therefore, there is need for knowledge of groundwater to support this large population. Of course, groundwater is also the largest freshwater reservoir in Africa, more than the freshwater lakes and rivers that we have. So therefore, there is need for proper management, and therefore we need capacity building in this respect. So growing population, increasing competing need for wash and smallholder agriculture and industrial uses. We need to manage that, and therefore there is need for knowledge and capacity building. Of course, the urbanization, the increase in urbanization with the risk of overexploitation and contamination. These are the risks that comes together alongside with the urbanization. That needs to be managed. And for that to be managed, we also need knowledge. So inadequate technical and financial institutional support is also there. We need to face that challenge. And how do we do that? We need knowledge, we need information, we need capacity to deal with that. Of course, we have to also realize the fact that groundwater will play a great role in climate adaptation because of its resilient nature. Next slide, please. Now, on this basis, what is the contribution of AMCOW, the African Ministerial Council on Water? Our contribution in terms of the groundwater program that we are running now, which is the APAGroP, based on two things, that we are looking at the mandate of the AMCOW, which is to support the member state to manage and utilize water resources to assure water and food and energy security in Africa. In doing that, we need capacity, we need information. And the capacity development is key. And on that basis, AMCOW recognized and identified groundwater as one of the key areas of deliverable. And therefore, we need to enhance human capacity development and information exchange among the member states. We need to facilitate exchange of knowledge, experience, and best practices in terms of groundwater development management among the African member states. And doing all those things means we need to enhance the capacity. We need to provide knowledge. So providing knowledge through capacity building. Next slide, please. And then in that case, what next click, please. Then why are we discussing groundwater? You realize that in this case, groundwater is key because of 4 key things. It ensures the groundwater water security in general, because it provides a cheap off-grid water supply, especially in rural areas. And increasingly many urban areas are relying on groundwater, not really the pipe-borne water system from surface reservoir. So groundwater is increasingly useful in that to maintain water security. In terms of food security, increasing use of groundwater in irrigation, smallholder irrigation is becoming apparent. And that is why groundwater is also critical. The next one is because groundwater is also relatively safe and protected from contamination. So in most cases, you can get it at a relatively good quality without any treatment. So it ensures safe water supply. And of course, the most important thing, in the face of the climate change, groundwater also provides resilience. So next slide, please. So with the APAGroP program of the AMCOW, our aim is to leverage on the science and reassert the influence of groundwater policy and practice in Africa. And the goals, next click, please. And the goal is to promote sustainable management, to promote appropriate technologies to improve the policy and practice among the member states. And in doing all these things, the key deliverable medium is knowledge and capacity building. Next slide, please. And based on that, our APAGroP program have three pillars: policy and institutional strengthening, tools and technical solution, then the capacity building. And if you look at the 6 thematic area, there are 2 key aspects that relates to capacity building and education. We have the groundwater knowledge hub and information sharing, and then we have the capacity strengthening. These are one of the thematic area that the APAGroP program is focusing. We want to generate, next slide, please. So we want to generate knowledge, and based on that, you can see the diagram we are seeing there show us the fact that we have 2 prongs into attacking this issue. The capacity development on one side, knowledge management on the other side. Capacity development in terms of policy and institutional strengthening, human capacity strengthening, then groundwater management support tools. In that case, we are going to develop capacity within the African continent. And the next, in terms of the information or knowledge management and knowledge sharing, we have the information sharing, we have the knowledge hub, and then we have the groundwater advocacy and gender inclusion. So through all this, we are going to enhance capacity development and knowledge management. Next slide. And this picture is giving us some of the knowledge management program that we are having. I mean, knowledge product, and on the right side, you are seeing the knowledge hub that we have some database. This knowledge hub of the APAGroP is a repository of information, data, existing literatures, atlases, and so on. In some of these, we are partnering with organizations like BGS that are providing groundwater atlas. So the knowledge management aspect of this capacity is for us to provide this information in the form of knowledge hub, so that AMCOW knowledge hub will serve as a one-stop hub where people can access information on groundwater resources in Africa. Next slide, please.
Moshood, we're running out of time. We must wrap up soon.
Okay. So moving forward, we have some policy recommendation. What we need to do: education and capacity building with respect to groundwater resilience and climate change. National water education and international cooperations are needed. We need to promote peer review learning between national government in order to improve capacity and education on groundwater. There is need for increase in research and collaboration on groundwater and data sharing in Africa. We need to promote e-learning tools, cost-effective mode of delivering capacity building. Of course, we need to create short courses in water management for policy and senior managers without technical know-how. We need to we need to pass the message to the managers who are not professionals in the field. Next slide. And finally, moving forward, as I said, we need technology transfer. We need to be, the knowledge and capacity development that we are talking about need to be transformational. It has to be at all levels, not only in one section. All levels must be involved in this capacity building, both national, local, and transboundary level. Partnership and supports are needed with the development partners. We also need that. Finance of the knowledge base is very important. Without finance, without appropriate investment, we may not be able to achieve the necessary capacity development. Next slide, and I think that is the last one. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Moshood. I appreciate the insightful presentation on a very important topic on capacity building in Africa with groundwater management. I look forward to the discussion time. We're going to keep this moving along. I'd like to welcome to the floor Kevin Pietersen, please.
Greetings all. Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to form part of this conference. I would like to upfront acknowledge all my colleagues in the water sector that has been part of my capacity building journey the past 20 years, particularly the Framework Program for Research, Education and Training in the water sector. I'm an associate of the UNESCO Chair in Hydrogeology and Institute for Water Studies at the University of the Western Cape. I'm also a regional groundwater consultant focusing on pragmatic groundwater governance solutions. Next slide, please. The African region faces several risks to water security, from extreme weather events, natural disasters, and state collapse or crisis. The region has undergone severe droughts. In the past, droughts were driven by natural climate variability, but with anthropogenic influences, the characteristics of drought are changing to include a type of drought that has a rapid onset and short duration. Cyclone Ida made landfall in Mozambique in March 2019. This weather system caused extensive flooding and damage in Mozambique, Malawi, and Zimbabwe, resulting in about 800 deaths. Unfortunately, cholera outbreaks are common in the region and is a feature in areas that has underperforming local authorities. In countries that have undergone civil unrest, investment in water infrastructure fell short, which was further aggravated by the destruction of infrastructure and consequently regress of water supply. Weak governance frameworks further worsened these problems. Issues related to climate change, climate variability, and climate proofing need to be continually addressed in water sector regional plans and programs. Across the region, there is an expectation of increased occurrence of extreme hydrological events, requiring the region to develop improved adaptive capacity to flood and drought events. Building resilience in groundwater resources provides an opportunity to improve water security by diversifying the water supply mix. Next slide, please. Increasing aridity and dwindling surface water supplies result in new opportunities for groundwater. Drivers that have a major bearing on its unfolding role and governance include the widespread poverty and food insecurity in the region, the continuing need for a basic domestic water supply in both rural and informal urban areas, rapid urbanization, and the need for drought security as part of all water provision. Globally, there has been cases of groundwater depletion driven largely by irrigated agriculture, resulting in a statement by a global group of scientists, practitioners, and experts to use groundwater in a sustainable manner to arrest the decline. However, in sub-Saharan Africa, most countries, the current groundwater use remains under 5% of national sustainable yield, suggesting that groundwater has the potential to be a foundational resource to support irrigated agriculture, urban and rural water security, and drought resilience across the region as it has in other global regions. Next slides, please. We know that capacity development matters. All groundwater resilient interventions can only be underpinned by human development. Whilst I was working at the South African Water Research Commission, there was a recognition that focus and targeted skills development within the water sector is fundamental ingredient for supporting the socio-economic development of South Africa while sustaining its scarce natural resources. This dialogue was catalyzed by a UNESCO WMO mission in 1998, which revealed a marked lack of human resources and competencies in the local water sector. In the UNESCO mission report, it was recognized that a framework program offering a broad spectrum of learning opportunities could provide a flexible structure with well-defined mechanisms for the achievement of capacity building. This resulted in the framework program for research, education, and training in the water sector, or short Fatwater. Fatwater was established in 2002 through the initiative of the then Department of Water Phase and Forestry, the involvement of UNESCO, and the financial support provided by the Flanders UNESCO Science Trust Fund. Fatwater Phase 1 ran from 2002 to 2005, and Phase 2 ran from 2007 to to 2010. The UNESCO Chair for Hydrology, hosted at the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town, was established in 2001 as an outcome of this engagement. On the basis of the outcomes of an impact assessment report for Fatwater Phases 2 and 3, completed in 2010, and a meeting held by the Department of Water Affairs and UNESCO in 2011, recommendations were made to launch Fatwater Phase 3 in 2014. Next slide, please. This phase of Fatwater 3 thus aims to develop and transfer knowledge to build critical mass of water scientists and to facilitate the process of implementation of the National Water Act by focusing on 6 thematic areas. The university is leading the institutional management and governance thematic area. Next slide, please. Fatwater Phase 1 successfully established 3 networks, including the groundwater network. The network succeeded in encouraging people to work together and to share knowledge. The networks cooperated with almost all the universities in South Africa and developed training material and short courses to enable professionals in the water sectors to do their work. Fatwater Phase 2 continued to support existing networks and the creation of new networks that contributed to integrated water resource management. However, the lack of linkage to sector skills planning and delivery systems for professional and career development, that is, the overemphasis of academic orientations of the networks, was observed as a challenge in the water sector. In Fatwater 3, the capacity building paradigm was changed by following an occupationally directed approach. This included alignment of agencies for common purpose, building networks focusing on prioritized occupations, and building sector capacity to sustain the process. Next slide, please. The process of developing an occupationally directed approach is driven by the perspective of industry and what the specific occupation requires its practitioners to know and to be able to do. The first step was identifying the occupational priorities. In this case, it would focus on water resource management, water use authorization, water regulation, water liaison, and water infrastructure management. For each of these occupational priorities, we went through a process of curriculum development and registration. This was done with first defining the occupational task in consultation with industry and sector experts. The key features of an occupational qualification are the balance between knowledge, practical skills, and workplace experience. The proposed curriculum was gazetted and comments invited. Following the registration of the qualification, learning material were developed, taking the workplace requirements into account. We are now piloting the qualifications in the workplace, and learners will receive a formal qualification and accreditation. Next slide, please. This slide just sets out the occupational task and practical knowledge and workplace model specification for the water liaison practitioner as gazetted by the Quality Council for Trade Occupations. So I've been involved in this process, developing the different learning materials and setting out the different programs. What it is basically an 18-month programs, which after the learners that forms part of that will get a formal qualification. And this training will be done in the workplace under supervision of mentors within the workplace, supported by experts in the sector. Next slide, please. So I believe that workplace-based qualifications model has relevance to our approach to training in Africa. Often our training, our capacity building programs takes place outside the workplace and does not take implementation capacity and priorities into account. Important consideration: understand the occupational purpose and priorities of national water ministries in groundwater resilience planning and management. Develop occupational tasks. This includes understanding of duties and responsibilities in resilience planning of groundwater managers in national water departments. Develop ladder of competencies required to implement the occupational tasks. Prepare training programs with practical skills modules, underpinning knowledge and work experience models to determine to what extent the program can be certified under national certification programs. And this is important. It needs to lead to qualifications. And then basically lobby for placing participants to practice the occupation and sign workplace agreements. And this is obviously important. Next slide. The elephant in this room is whether we have the time and resources available for such long-term capacity building programs. The UNESCO program was more than 20 years investment in capacity building. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So we have a few moments for question and answer, and then I want to move it along because I want to make sure that we get all of our panelists for the special panel on groundwater education and capacity development with their presentations before the closing ceremony. So Jorge, are you wanting me to wait until the very, very end or to do it now with the questions?
I guess that Alice could begin with the panel and we could have this plenary of question and answers at the very end.
Fantastic.
Okay. Thank you, Adrian, and thank you, Jorge, and thank you all in particular. Thank you, Kevin and Moshood, for their very interesting presentation. I don't want to waste time, so we immediately go to the questions with our four panelists, to the panel. Definitely, I would like to ask each one of our high-level panelists to stick, really don't use no more than 3 minutes to answer to me. The big question here is the investment, the quality, the quantity of groundwater education and capacity building adequate in the different regions of the world. I would like to start asking to Margaret Irungu some thoughts about, in particular for Kenya and for the work she's doing in the ministry, looking at also transboundary aquifer. Margaret, please.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting us for this session on groundwater discussion. I'm presenting my talking notes for my director who was not able to come to this session due to unavoidable circumstances. But as we know that groundwater in Africa provide socio-economic improvement, and therefore is a very important resource. It also augments surface water, especially during climate change. And it is the biggest freshwater reservoir in Africa, mostly, and not really affected by evaporation. And it is usually used for water supply for the small towns and the rural area. So in Africa in particular, we are constrained by financial and human institutional for the water access. In particular for groundwater, and it plays a very important role. So we really need capacity building in that area of groundwater. Within the region, transboundary water aquifers occupies a very big area, especially within the dry lands. And the aquifers vary in size and in different characteristics. And they are also affected by the risk of exploitation. So in essence, the governments within Africa have found the important potential for groundwater in cushioning, especially during adaptive climatic change, and also for food insecurity, among others. So groundwater in the region varies from country to country. In Kenya, it is well reasonably developed, and also in Ethiopia. But in some cases like Somalia and Djibouti, it is not very well understood. So within the Nile Basin, there are interventions that have come up to enhance conjunctive groundwater surface water understanding. And one of the program has an objective of effective utilization of groundwater and surface water through understanding and capacity within the cross-border institutions and mechanisms. And the benefit of this program will enhance the mapping of the aquifers in selected aquifers within the Nile region. So the challenges that we are experiencing is lack of investment, lack of knowledge, understanding of the aquifer and the extent, poor of no existing policies, or if there are policies within the countries, they are not, there's a lot of difference between these policies. So we also are experiencing challenges of poor management practices that pollute these aquifers through domestic and agriculture and also industrial uses. And we also have limited capacity to enhance groundwater storage, or there is also overexploitation leading to depletion of this aquifer. So we are also experiencing inadequate monitoring system. So we really need capacity building within this area of groundwater. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much. And in particular, you in the department on transboundary aquifer, there is an increased important issue. I mean, how to improve capacity in the education on managing and assessment of transboundary aquifer. What about Latin America now? I mean, I will call Mr. Manganelli. I mean, it is the investment on groundwater education, capacity building, adequate in Latin America? What is the situation? Mr. Manganelli.
Thank you, Alice. Well, one always tend to think that investments in education are never enough. But even though this is the really case, one must be realistic when evaluating the economic possibilities of our countries. On the other hand, if we assume that investments in education are relatively low, we must consider that specifically in groundwater, these investments are really even more low or more scarce. Although a priori this can be seen as something unwanted, it is also in these cases that we must see the opportunity to generate a wide debate and propose some changes in the vision of education. For example, in Uruguay, public education is free, and it is the state that allocates the funds for the different levels of education. Now, one might think that in the face of a particular interest in training people in groundwater, a kind of specific fund will be established with the contribution of the future recipients of professionals, public or private, to improve the training of these professionals. For example, the water supply company, municipalities, management agencies could allocate a small percentage of their funds, of their budgets, to help tertiary public education institutions to create and maintain a specific career on groundwater. We don't have a specific career on groundwater in Uruguay. So it's important to think about it. We have an example of one enterprise that is in process of installation in Uruguay in another theme, not groundwater, but they need specific technicians that don't exist in our country. So they want to talk to the authorities in order to finance one career that can provide those technicians that they need. So maybe it's not the best way to create a career, but those future students wouldn't have been able to access that career, and probably wouldn't have been able to access the job market if that situation had not occurred. I just present this as an element to think. I don't know if it's very well understood, but I don't know. Maybe education capacity building and in groundwater has gained momentum across the different projects that we have in the region. For example, the Guarani Aquifer Project, the Trifinio Aquifer, the UNESCO Liaison program have made the importance of groundwater and its knowledge visible to a large number of inhabitants of the region. And that has also promoted education.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, I want to recall, as Adrian said at the very beginning, you are the executive director of the UNESCO Regional Center for Groundwater Management for Latin American and Caribbean. So definitely your role it's crucial in that part of the world. We are talking about investment. We are talking about programs that support capacity and education on groundwater. And the Global Environment Facility is one of these programs that really has created knowledge about particularly transboundary aquifers. That is a crucial issue in the groundwater realm. I would like to ask Mr. Chris Severin what is the JEF contribution up to him to this topic, to this problem, and if you can let us know a little bit more about the JEF IWRA project, Chris.
Thank you so much, Leti, and good afternoon, and I guess maybe mid-morning to some of us. Anyway, so yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'll just give you a short spiel. I mean, so the GF, just to get, I'm sure a lot of us have already met. I can see that and the familiar faces around different presentations already. But still, the GF, as you may know, was established back in 1992, so a couple of years ago. We have so far dispersed around $20 billion and leveraged $107 million in co-financing, if you will. So it's a fairly big operation. So it may be more than a program, even though you refer to it as a program, Alicia. I think it's actually a funding organization. You could call it a small IFI, if you will. So anyway, so we've been funding these nearly 5,000 projects in supporting 24,000 different civil organizations. So it's a big entity. Within that, we of course have the International Waters focal area, which I manage. That's my day job when I'm not sit on panels. And within that, we have been supporting. We support these 5 different ecosystems. One of them being the transboundary aquifers. So it's around nearly $2 billion over the 7 years now. And that has leveraged again another $11 billion. So I mean, it's a substantial program. Within that, we have had a continuous effort within knowledge management, capacity building. Luckily, my predecessor, he had the wisdom to start saying we do need a capacity building arm of all these transboundary water projects, especially when you talk about transboundary in any, as soon as you're more than one entity. You all know this on this panel, and everybody, most of the people online here today. When you work with somebody, it's a matter of building trust, and in order to get any capacity building going, we do need to trust our partners. So one of the things that the GF through this IWRA program has been doing is working with partners, building that trust that enables frank conversations, that enables knowledge sharing, that enables data sharing. Data sharing is one of the key issues when you look at the transboundary aquifers or transboundary river systems or marine life, it's always the same. There is, and it may be something that's very ingrained in us as human beings. We always take care of our own first. But unfortunately, when we do talk about transboundary aquifers, we do need to do this together. There's simply no other way. If we do this as a separate entity, we will fail. I mean, there's lots of good examples in history. Now with the climate change and all these other good things happening on top of, and the stress on our aquifers are increasing, we simply need to work together. And I think an entity like the IWRA investment that we have been doing, it's more than 20 years now, or 20 years this year. So it's been going for a while, and it has actually we have been able to develop tools and methodologies to bring these different stakeholders together. A good example of this is what's happened within the groundwater community. We have been funding what we call community of practice, bringing all your clever people together into one group, so that you can build needed knowledge in different entities. But anyway, I saw that most recently, I know I talked to the program manager of IWRA today and also yesterday, and he showed me the relaunch of the groundwater and conjunctive water management hub on IWRA. And I think that's one of the newest offsprings and real proofs and results that it actually helps, that we have been able to, through small amount of dedicated funding and a lot of volunteering time and effort from all the people in this group, have been able to make a tangible result. Of course, I mean, a website is not everything. It's not anything at all without people behind it and without somebody implementing it on the ground. And I think the groundwater community is doing that. So we're really thankful, and we're looking forward to continue working with you in the coming years. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chris, in particular, because GEF now is giving a lot of importance to conjunctive management, surface and groundwater, and climate change impacts. Last but not least, and the last is always the dearest of my heart person. He's the former ambassador of Kenya to UNESCO, a lady with whom we have taken a lot of battles for groundwater, and is Madame Kimulu. Madame Kimulu, I mean, what can you tell us about the need, or why it doesn't work, or what you would like to see in groundwater education and capacity in Africa?
Thanks, Alice and the team. Coming last, Margaret, Moshood, and others have talked about Africa. In Africa, groundwater is an important source of fresh water, and it is essential to supplement the surface water resource in a region that is increasingly affected by recurrent drought. Africa states are also largely dependent on ground shared water between countries and communities. Although Africa is endowed with large and often underutilized aquifer resources, the climate variability alters the amount of surface water that is available. People in the region are therefore increasingly turning to groundwater. This calls for the need of good governance on management, plus education on groundwater at all levels. How does Africa achieve this? First is to recognize and reorganize the challenges that are there, which include, I'll just name three, that the demand for water is increasing with the population growth and economic development. Understanding of the African groundwater system is limited since there are few professionals in the hydrogeological domain. Groundwater education is not captured at basic and secondary school curriculum. Advocacy and public awareness on this hidden and forgotten resource is limited. Introduction of groundwater education in schools curriculum is essential and should be introduced. The third one, lack of reliable data and monitoring. We need to create capacity and educate a new generation of policy makers that can act with a certain degree of adaptability to implement proper policies and strategies for efficient groundwater governance at different scale. To be able to strengthen education and capacity on development of groundwater, there is the need of huge capital investment. And above all, ensure that governance arrangements help mobilize water finance, allocate finance resources in an efficient, transparent, and timely manner for education and capacity building on groundwater in Africa. It is important to note that several African states and economic blocs, in partnership with the development partners, especially UNESCO, where I'm quite clear aware about, have initiated several programs and established designated groundwater institutions. One of them is in Kenya. Kenya established the Regional Center on Groundwater Resource Education Training as a UNESCO Category 2 center, with a broad mandate of initiating and conducting regional research in mapping and assessment of aquifer system and management, conservation, protection, and governance of groundwater resources, very similar to what AMCOW was talking about. SADC, the Southern African Development Community, established the Groundwater Management Institute as a regional center of excellence for sustainable management of groundwater. And AMCOW, as has been said, I'll report after you, AMCOW, the African Union has established a groundwater commission, and they have dedicated theme dealing with education, knowledge, and capacity development, and well-elaborate action plan highlighting on the following focus areas. 1, capacity building, education and training, knowledge generation and dissemination, and networking. And finally, to have sustainable and efficient groundwater exploration, development, and management in Africa, there is great need of education and capacity building. This will be achieved only when reliable and regular funding procedures and policies are in place. To you all, assist Africa achieve groundwater education and capacity building. Thank you for having us, especially two from Kenya. We appreciate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. The floor is to Adrian and Jorge. Thank you to all panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alicia, and thank you, Mary Himulu. I remember meeting you a little while ago and have missed seeing you the last few times I've been at UNESCO, so it's wonderful to hear your wisdom and perspective. I deeply appreciate it. Jorge, would you like to also contribute to the question time here? I wanted to just start by asking our panelists a little bit about, well, two questions rolled into one. What is the role of local stakeholders, given that many of these issues are cross-boundary issues and you've got to have different kinds of communities working together collaboratively and overcoming their own individual interests? And secondly, what role do you see open science playing in helping facilitate capacity building?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have to bring this session to an end. We've run out of time. I'm sorry, Adrian, to interrupt.
Not a problem, Callum. I appreciate it. The question, just so that it's something you can mull on, is to do with local stakeholders, the importance of them, and secondly, the role of open science. But I believe the session has now been brought to a close. So without further ado, I would like to very much thank the IWRA and UNESCO for helping put together this important event on groundwater management and resiliency. And thank you very much to our distinguished guests and speakers. We wish you all the best, and I hope you enjoy the closing ceremony, which will be occurring in a few moments. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions.
Thank you.
Thank you.